The mountains had always been Kalen's home. For years, the Apache hunter had lived alone among the endless forests, rocky cliffs, and quiet valleys where few people dared to travel. He knew every hidden trail, every river crossing, and every sound the wilderness made. The mountains spoke to him in ways people never could. But that morning, something was different. Kalen opened his eyes slowly as sunlight slipped through the cracks of his wooden cabin. His head throbbed, and his memories felt like broken pieces of a dream. The last thing he remembered was a violent storm sweeping across the mountains. Thunder had shaken the earth, and freezing rain had covered the forest. He had been returning from a hunting trip when he heard a strange cry coming from deep among the trees. Against his better judgment, he had followed the sound. That was all he remembered. Kalen pushed himself up from his bed and immediately noticed something unusual. The fire was still burning. He always let the fire die before sleeping unless he expected trouble. But someone had added fresh wood during the night. His eyes narrowed as he scanned the room. Then he saw her. A stranger was sleeping beside the fireplace. Kalen froze. The woman was unlike anyone he had ever seen. She had greenish skin, long dark hair, and powerful features that revealed she was not human. Her broad shoulders and sharp ears marked her as an orc. Yet there was something peaceful about her expression as she slept beneath a blanket. The strangest part was what she was wearing. His clothes. His old brown shirt hung loosely over her frame, and his spare trousers were tied around her waist. Clothes that had belonged to Kalen were now covering a complete stranger. His hand moved toward the knife beside his bed. "Who are you?" he demanded. The orc woman's eyes opened. For a moment, fear flashed across her face. But instead of attacking, she slowly raised her hands to show she meant no harm. "You finally woke up," she said softly. Kalen stared at her. "You are in my cabin, wearing my clothes. Explain." The woman looked down at the shirt and gave a small, embarrassed smile. "I suppose I should explain that first." She carefully stood up. Even injured, she was taller than most humans Kalen had met. But she moved slowly, as if trying not to frighten him. "My name is Lura," she said. "3 nights ago, you found me in the forest." Kalen frowned. "I found you?" "Yes." She pointed toward the doorway. "You carried me through the storm. You brought me here when I could no longer walk." Kalen searched his memories. The storm. The voice in the forest. A shadow lying beneath a fallen tree. His own hands lifting someone and carrying them through the snow. But he never imagined it was an orc. "Why would I do that?" he asked. Lura looked at him with surprise. "Because I was dying." Her words were simple, but they carried weight. She explained that she was an outcast from the Iron Fang orc clan. Unlike the warriors who wanted conquest and bloodshed, Lura had refused to join their wars against humans and other tribes. Because of that, her own people had turned against her. She had escaped into the mountains, wounded and alone. Then the hunters found her. Or at least, they almost did. Kalen remembered seeing footprints behind him during the storm. He had assumed they belonged to wild animals. Now he realized someone had been chasing her. "You should leave," Kalen said. Lura looked hurt but did not argue. "I understand." She slowly reached for the blanket, preparing to move. But Kalen noticed her injury. The bandage around her side was soaked through. She was still weak. His expression hardened. "Not yet." Lura looked back. "What? You cannot survive outside like this." A faint smile appeared on her face. "So you are letting me stay?" "For a few days," Kalen replied quickly. "Until you can walk." Lura nodded. "Thank you." Kalen turned away, pretending not to notice her gratitude. He had spent years avoiding people. Trusting no one. Depending only on himself. Now, somehow, his quiet cabin had become home to an injured orc woman wearing his clothes. He had no idea why fate had brought her to his doorstep. But deep inside, Kalen felt something he had not felt in many years. A strange feeling that perhaps his lonely life was about to change forever. The first few days after Laura arrived were filled with silence. Kalen was not a man who enjoyed unnecessary conversation. He had spent years living alone in the mountains, where the sound of wind through the trees was more familiar than the voices of people. He knew how to track animals, survive harsh winters, and defend himself against danger, but sharing his home with someone else was a challenge he had never expected. Especially someone like Laura. Every morning, Kalen woke before sunrise and prepared for the day as he always had. He expected to find the orc woman resting by the fire, unable to do much while her wound healed. Instead, on the third morning, he stepped outside and stopped. The fence he had been meaning to repair for weeks was fixed. The broken wooden posts had been replaced, the loose boards had been tied together, and the entire area looked stronger than before. Kalen turned toward the cabin. Laura stood in the doorway holding a cup of water. "I thought it needed fixing," she said. Kalen looked at the repaired fence, then back at her. "You did this?" She nodded. "You gave me shelter. I should give something in return." Kalen studied her carefully. Most humans he had met feared orcs. They believed orcs were violent creatures who only understood strength and destruction. Kalen had heard those stories his entire life. But the woman standing in front of him was different. She was powerful, yes. But she was also patient. She noticed things. She cared. Over the next few days, Laura slowly became part of the rhythm of the cabin. She gathered firewood, cleaned the small home, and learned how Kalen organized his supplies. At first, he worried she would break things because of her size and strength. He quickly learned he was wrong. Laura could lift heavy logs with ease, but she handled delicate tasks with surprising care. She repaired torn clothing, prepared meals, and even carved small wooden figures from fallen branches. One evening, Kalen returned from hunting and found her sitting near the fire. "What are you making?" he asked. Laura looked up. "A bird." Kalen examined the small wooden carving. "It looks nothing like a bird." Laura frowned. "It is my first attempt." A rare smile appeared on Kalen's face. "I can see that." For a moment, there was silence. Then Laura laughed. The sound surprised Kalen. He realized he had not heard genuine laughter inside his cabin for many years. As the days passed, Kalen began asking questions about her world. He learned that the orcs were not one united people. Some clans valued honor and peace, while others had chosen violence. Laura's clan had once protected the mountains, but a new leader had changed their ways. He taught them that fear was stronger than respect, Laura explained. Kalen looked into the fire. "Many people believe fear is power." "And they are wrong," Laura replied. Her answer made him look at her. "What makes you say that?" "Because fear only creates enemies. Respect creates allies." Kalen remembered those words. They sounded like something his own elders had taught him. Slowly, the distance between them began to disappear. Laura became curious about Apache traditions. She asked about the meaning of different symbols, the importance of family, and the connection between people and nature. Kalen was surprised by how seriously she listened. One afternoon, he showed her how to track animals through the forest. "Look carefully," he said, pointing toward the ground. Laura studied the dirt. "Deer." Kalen shook his head. "Too large." She looked again. "A mountain elk." This time, Kalen nodded. "You learn quickly." Laura smiled. "My people say orcs only have strength." She looked toward the trees. "But strength without wisdom is useless." Kalen realized something. The stories he had heard about orcs were incomplete. Perhaps they were not lies, but they were not the whole truth either. However, peace inside the cabin could not last forever. Far beyond the mountains, men were following tracks through the wilderness. They carried weapons. They carried orders. And they were searching for the orc woman who had escaped. One of them found a piece of torn fabric caught on a tree branch. He lifted it and recognized the symbol. She passed this way, the hunter said. The others looked toward the mountains. She will not get far. Back at the cabin, Kalen and Lura remained unaware of the danger approaching. For the first time in years, Kalen no longer felt completely alone. But the world outside was about to test whether two people from different worlds could truly stand together. The peaceful days in the mountains ended without warning. Kalen had always trusted his instincts. Living alone in the wilderness had taught him that danger rarely announced itself. A storm gave signs before it arrived. A predator revealed itself through tracks and silence. Enemies left traces even when they believed they were invisible. That morning, Kalen noticed something unusual. The forest was too quiet. The birds had stopped singing. The deer had disappeared from the nearby trails. Even the wind seemed to carry a strange feeling through the trees. Lura noticed his expression as he stood outside the cabin. "What is wrong?" she asked. Kalen looked toward the distant mountains. "We are not alone." Lura immediately became serious. "Who?" Kalen did not answer at first. He walked toward the edge of the forest and crouched beside a patch of disturbed soil. Footprints. Many of them. Men. Armed men. Lura's face changed when she saw them. "They found me." Kalen looked at her. "Who?" "The ones who were chasing me before you rescued me." For the first time, Kalen saw real fear in her eyes. Not fear for herself. Fear for what would happen if those people reached his home. "They will not stop," Lura whispered. "If they capture me, they will force me to reveal where my clan's ancient valley is located." Kalen stood. "Then they will have to get through me first." Lura stared at him. "You barely know me." Kalen looked back toward the cabin. "You needed help." That was enough. Those simple words meant more to Lura than he realized. Before she could respond, the sound of horses echoed through the trees. The hunters had arrived. Kalen quickly prepared for the attack. He moved with the calm precision of someone who had survived countless dangers. He hid supplies, prepared escape routes, and showed Lura where to move if they were overwhelmed. "How many are there?" she asked. "Too many." Lura clenched her fists. "You should leave." Kalen looked at her. "What?" "This is my fight. You have no reason to risk your life." Kalen tightened the grip on his weapon. "You came into my home injured. You were alone. I will not abandon someone who needs protection." Lura looked at him silently. She had spent her entire life being judged by her appearance. Humans feared her because she was an orc. Orcs rejected her because she refused to follow their ways. But this man had seen her weakness and offered kindness. The attack began before sunset. A group of armed mercenaries surrounded the cabin. Their leader stepped forward. "Apache." Kalen remained near the doorway. "You are trespassing." The man laughed. "We are here for the orc." Lura stepped beside Kalen. "She is under my protection." The mercenary smiled. "You would risk your life for a creature like her?" Kalen's expression hardened. "She is not a creature." The battle erupted. The mercenaries rushed forward, expecting an easy victory. They believed they were hunting a wounded orc and an isolated mountain man. They were wrong. Kalen moved through the trees like a shadow. He used the forest itself as his advantage, striking from unexpected positions and disappearing before enemies could react. But the attackers were prepared. They had weapons designed to capture Lura, not kill her. When one mercenary managed to corner Kalen, Laura intervened. With incredible strength, she lifted the man away and threw him aside. Kalen stared at her. "You were hiding that ability." Laura looked embarrassed. "I did not want you to see me as a monster." Kalen answered without hesitation. "I see you as someone who saved my life today." Together, they fought their way out of the cabin. But they soon realized they could not stay. The mercenaries would return with more men. As night covered the mountains, Kalen and Laura escaped through hidden trails known only to him. They traveled deep into the wilderness until they reached a quiet valley. There, beneath the stars, Laura finally revealed the truth. The pendant around her neck was not just a family symbol. It was an ancient artifact passed down through generations of orc leaders. "Whoever holds it can unite the clans," she explained. Kalen looked at the pendant. "And your enemies want it?" Laura nodded. "They want power." Kalen looked toward the dark mountains ahead. Protecting Laura was no longer just about saving one person. It meant standing against those who wanted to control an entire people. And for the first time in years, Kalen was not fighting alone. The mountains were different when Kalen was no longer traveling alone. For years, he had walked through the wilderness with only his thoughts as company. Every journey had been about survival, finding food, avoiding danger, and returning to his quiet cabin before nightfall. Now, every step carried a different purpose. He was protecting Laura. And Laura was no longer just the injured stranger who had appeared in his cabin. She had become his companion. They moved through the mountain trails for several days, following old maps and forgotten paths that even many hunters had never discovered. Kalen knew the land well, but even he had never traveled this deep into the northern valleys. Laura carried the ancient pendant around her neck, hidden beneath her clothing. She rarely touched it, but Kalen noticed that whenever they stopped to rest, her hand would move toward it. "You are afraid of what it means," Kalen said one evening. Laura looked at him beside the fire. "Yes." Kalen waited. "My people believe the pendant belongs to the one destined to lead them," she explained. "But I never wanted to rule anyone." "What do you want?" Laura looked into the flames. "I want my people to stop fighting. I want children to grow up without learning to hate humans. I want peace." Kalen nodded slowly. "That sounds like leadership." Laura looked surprised. "I thought leaders wanted power. Good leaders want responsibility." Those words stayed with her. As they continued their journey, Kalen began seeing more of the person behind the legends. Laura was not the fierce warrior many feared. She was compassionate and thoughtful. She cared about strangers, protected animals, and always looked for ways to help people they met along the road. One afternoon, they discovered a small group of travelers trapped by bandits near a mountain pass. Kalen immediately recognized the danger. "We should keep moving," he whispered. But Laura was already walking forward. "They need help." Kalen sighed. "You always do that." "Do what?" "Walk toward danger." Laura smiled. "Maybe someone needs to." Together, they defeated the bandits and rescued the travelers. The humans were terrified at first when they saw Laura, but their fear slowly changed when they realized she had saved them. An older man looked at her with disbelief. "You are an orc." Laura nodded. "And you saved us." She smiled. "Everyone deserves to be saved." The word spread. For the first time, humans who had only heard frightening stories about orcs began sharing a different story. A story about an orc woman who protected lives instead of destroying them. But danger was still following them. The mercenaries had not given up. Their leader, Garrick, tracked them through the mountains with a group of soldiers. He was not interested in revenge. He wanted the pendant. With it, he believed he could control the orc clans and gain power over the entire frontier. Meanwhile, Kalen and Laura reached the entrance to the hidden valley. The place was breathtaking. Tall stone pillars surrounded a peaceful land filled with waterfalls, ancient trees, and homes carved into the mountainside. It was a place untouched by the outside world. "The hidden valley," Laura whispered. Kaelin looked at her. "Your home?" She shook her head. "No." She looked around. "Something greater." They stepped forward, expecting to find safety. Instead, they found silence. Too much silence. Kaelin immediately sensed something was wrong. The village gates were open. No guards stood outside. No voices came from inside. Laura moved forward carefully. Then they saw the signs. The valley had been attacked. Buildings were damaged. Fires had burned through parts of the village. The peaceful home they had searched for was wounded. Laura fell silent. "They came before us." Kaelin looked at the destruction around them. The enemy had reached the valley. But they were not finished. From the shadows of the mountains, voices echoed. "You finally brought us the pendant." Kaelin turned. Mercenaries surrounded them. And standing at the front was Garrick. The man who had hunted Laura from the beginning. He smiled. "You saved me the trouble of finding the valley myself." Kaelin stepped forward, ready to fight. But this time, the enemy was stronger. The battle ahead would decide more than Laura's fate. It would decide whether two worlds that had hated each other for generations could finally find peace. The Hidden Valley had once been a place of peace. For generations, the Orc elders had protected it from the outside world. The waterfalls, ancient trees, and stone homes carved into the mountains had stood as a symbol of hope, a place where different clans could live without fear. But now, the valley was surrounded by enemies. Garrick stood at the entrance with his mercenaries behind him. His armor was covered in dust from the long journey, but his confidence remained untouched. He looked at Laura and smiled. "You have made this much harder than it needed to be." Laura stepped forward. "You destroyed this valley for a piece of metal?" Garrick laughed. "You still do not understand. That pendant is not just a symbol. It is authority. Whoever controls it controls the Orc clans." Kaelin moved closer to Laura. "He wants people to follow him through fear." Garrick looked at Kaelin with disgust. "And you are willing to die for an Orc?" Kaelin's eyes narrowed. "I am willing to stand with someone who has more honor than you." The mercenaries raised their weapons. The battle began. The first wave rushed into the valley. Kaelin moved quickly, using the terrain to his advantage. He knew the mountains better than any of Garrick's men. Every rock, every path, and every hidden passage became a weapon. But this was no ordinary fight. Garrick had brought dozens of soldiers. The peaceful Orcs of the valley joined the battle, but they were not prepared for war. Many had spent their lives protecting their home, not fighting enemies. Laura saw the fear in their eyes. She understood something. If she became like Garrick, if she used the pendant to force people to obey, then nothing would truly change. She climbed onto a stone platform in the center of the valley. "Stop!" Her voice echoed across the battlefield. Everyone turned. Even the fighting slowed. Garrick laughed. "You think words will save you?" Laura ignored him. She held the ancient pendant in her hand. "For generations, our people have believed this gives one person the right to rule all others." The Orcs watched silently. But power does not create a leader. She looked toward the elders. Fear does not create loyalty. Then she looked at the humans fighting beside them. And hatred does not create peace. Garrick shouted. "Do not listen to her." But Laura continued. "I was given this pendant because people believed I could control their future." She closed her hand around it. "But our future should never belong to one person." Before anyone could react, Laura placed the pendant against the ancient stone altar beside her. A symbol of power that had caused generations of conflict. Then she destroyed it. A wave of shock moved through the valley. The artifact that everyone had fought over was gone. Garrick stared in disbelief. "What have you done?" Laura looked at him. "I removed the reason you wanted war." For the first time, Garrick had no answer. His entire plan depended on controlling the pendant. Without it, he had nothing to offer his followers. The mercenaries began looking at each other. Many had not joined because they hated orcs. They had joined because Garrick promised wealth and power. Now those promises meant nothing. One soldier lowered his weapon. Another followed. Soon, the army that had arrived to conquer the valley began to fall apart. Garrick screamed in anger and charged toward Laura. But Kaelin stepped between them. The fight between the two men was fierce. Garrick was stronger than expected, but he relied on anger. Kaelin fought with patience and control. Every strike had purpose. Every movement had meaning. Finally, Garrick fell. The battle was over. The valley became quiet. For a moment, nobody knew what would happen next. Then an elderly orc stepped forward. "You destroyed the symbol of power." Laura lowered her head. "I did." The elder looked around at the humans and orcs standing together. "And perhaps that was exactly what we needed." Peace did not come instantly. Old hatred did not disappear in one day. But something important had changed. People had witnessed an orc woman protect humans. They had seen an Apache warrior defend someone others feared. They had seen enemies become allies. Later that evening, Kaelin and Laura sat beside the valley's river. "You could have ruled them," Kaelin said. Laura looked at the water. "I never wanted a throne." "What did you want?" She looked at him. "A home." Kaelin smiled slightly. For the first time, he realized something. The cabin in the mountains had never truly been his home. Not until someone else had entered it. Not until someone had brought warmth back into his lonely life. But their journey was not over yet. Because peace had been won. Now they had to build it. The mountains had always been silent. For most of Kaelin's life, that silence had been his companion. He had walked through endless forests, crossed frozen rivers, and hunted beneath skies filled with stars, believing that solitude was the only life meant for him. But everything had changed. The same cabin that once held only one person now carried the sounds of another life. Laughter. Conversation. Hope. Months had passed since the battle in the hidden valley. The story of Laura and Kaelin had traveled far beyond the mountains. People who once believed orcs were nothing but dangerous creatures began hearing a different tale. They heard about an orc woman who chose peace over power. They heard about an Apache hunter who protected someone the world feared. And they heard about two people from different worlds who proved that understanding was stronger than hatred. The hidden valley slowly began to heal. Orcs rebuilt their homes. Travelers returned. Small groups of humans came to trade and learn about the people they once feared. It was not perfect, and there were still those who held on to old beliefs, but every friendship built another bridge between their worlds. And at the center of it all were Kaelin and Laura. One morning, Kaelin returned to his cabin carrying a bundle of wood. He stopped at the doorway and smiled. Inside, Laura was sitting beside the fire, wearing another one of his old shirts. Kaelin shook his head. "You know, I have noticed something." Laura looked up. "What?" "You keep stealing my clothes." She looked down at the shirt and laughed. "Stealing? You brought me home wearing them." Kaelin smiled. "That was one time. One very important time." He walked inside and placed the wood near the fireplace. "You still remember that morning?" "How could I forget?" Laura smiled. "I woke up in a stranger's cabin, wearing a man's clothes, and the first thing you did was point a knife at me." Kaelin looked embarrassed. "I did not know who you were." "And now?" He looked at her. Now I know. The simple answer made her smile. Over time, their relationship had changed in ways neither expected. At first, Kalen had only seen Laura as someone who needed protection. Then he saw her courage. Then her kindness. Then the person beneath the stories and rumors. And somewhere along the way, he realized she was no longer a stranger who had entered his home. She was the reason it felt like home. That evening, people from the valley gathered near the river for a celebration. Orc families and human travelers sat together, sharing food and stories. An elder approached Kalen. You changed something that many believed could never change. Kalen looked toward Laura. No. She did. The elder smiled. You both did. Later, when the celebration ended, Kalen and Laura walked back toward the cabin. The sky was painted with orange and gold as the sun disappeared behind the mountains. Laura touched the small necklace Kalen had made for her. It was not a symbol of power like the ancient pendant. It was something different. A symbol of friendship. Family. Choice. You made this yourself? She asked. Kalen nodded. It is not much. Laura smiled. It is more valuable than anything I have ever owned. Kalen looked at the mountains around them. For years, he thought being alone made him strong. But now he understood something. Strength was not only surviving by yourself. Strength was having someone beside you and choosing to protect them every day. As they reached the cabin, Laura looked back at the path where she had first arrived, wounded and afraid. I came here thinking I had lost everything. Kalen stood beside her. And what did you find? She looked at him. A home. The word stayed with him. Because he realized he had found something too. Not just a companion. Not just someone to share his cabin with. He had found the person who brought light into a life that had been filled with darkness. Years later, people would tell stories about the Apache hunter and the orc woman who changed the frontier forever. Some would say it was a story about war. Others would say it was a story about two races finding peace. But those who knew the truth would say it was much simpler. It was the story of a lonely man who rescued a stranger. And discovered that sometimes the person you save is the one who saves you in return.